Thank you both.
Let's do it. I'm
Welcome
hungry.
to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I'm Jocelyn Turner, and joining me is my co host, Dr. Rogers Kane. Tonight, we're discussing a topic that affects every one of us, regardless of where we live, our age, or our profession: climate and its impact on our health, communities, and future. When many people hear the words climate change, they think about melting ice caps, rising sea levels, or severe weather events. But climate also influences the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, our physical and mental health, and the safety and resilience of our neighborhoods. Here in Florida, we are experiencing firsthand the effects of extreme heat, stronger storms, flooding, and environmental challenges that can impact families, children, seniors, and vulnerable populations. Understanding these issues and identifying practical solutions is critical to protecting both public health and our quality of life. We are honored to be joined by two distinguished guests who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to this important conversation. Dr. Jeff Goldhagen has dedicated his career to advancing child health and advocating for healthy communities. And Dr. Lorene Husband is a respected leader in climate and sustainability initiatives, working to help communities build resilience and prepare for the future. Together, we will explore how climate affects our daily lives, why it is a public health issue, what is happening in our local communities, and most importantly, what each of us can do to make a positive difference. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in tonight. And I will first say, before bringing in our guest, Dr. Kane, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I apologize to our viewers for being a little bit tardy this evening. We just was having a little technical difficulties, but we're here. So
Primarily me. I forgot to apologize for that. I was a technical issue to our regular guests. So thank you all, and thank you for saying that, Dr. Kane. And as in my opening remarks, Dr. Goldhagen and Dr. Husband, I and they both like to be called Jeff and Lorene. So I'm canning the doctor and saying Jeff and Lorene. Um, Today it's just hot. Like if you live in Florida this time of year, that's all you can say. You're describing the weather, but the temperatures seem more extreme. At first I used to think because I'm getting older, but it is more than just that. So welcome, Jeff and Lorene. How are you both doing this evening? I'll start with Lorene. How are you doing this evening, Lorene? You're muted.
unmute yourself, Lorraine.
So I'll start with Jeff while Tyrone helps Lorene unmute herself. Jeff, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, and thanks for having Lorene and I, and thanks for focusing on such an important issue for all of us.
Yes, it is. And Jeff, it actually gets kind of scary. Oh, Lorene. Welcome, Lorene. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, she unmuted herself. Now she.
I'm doing
There we go.
fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, we are so pleased to have both of you. And these are to our audience.
It's kind
These
of going in and out.
You're going in and out, or I'm going in and out. Which is it? You are?
Yes, I think
I'll let
Lorraine's connection is coming in and out.
So we'll let our behind the scenes guru Tyrone work on her technology with her. So I'm going to go ahead, Jeff, and start with you. What does climate change look like in everyday life for residents of Florida, and how are you in the years you've lived in Florida? How are you seeing it different than past years and from one year to the next?
Well, first, I think it's critically important to understand that climate change is a global issue. And in many ways, it's an existential issue in the sense that if there continues to be the same trajectory of, as you mentioned, of increased heat, increased storms, and things as bizarre as changes in the Gulf Stream and so on and so forth, it will affect us all and the viability of us living on this planet. And so it's not just Florida; it's what's happening. It's what's happening globally that will impact us directly and indirectly. Every year we break the last year's
Records?
a record for what for heat. And so what we're seeing is a trajectory that's just not stopping. And the question is how to build resilient communities in the short term and how to prevent the onslaught in the long term. And unfortunately, very much unfortunately, it's not just a local issue; it's a state issue, and it's a national issue. And our state and federal government are not responding as we need them to respond.
Yeah, and you're right. And I don't know about the rest of you, or even to our viewers, by the way, if you have any questions for our guests throughout this conversation, feel free to chime in. And, I just, it bothers me, quite frankly. I'm going through some issues with my homeowner association. I guess I shouldn't throw them under the bus, but all of my shrubbery are dying. So I'm like, I'm trying. I'm getting all frantic about it. Like, don't squeeze me. Can you give me some rain? And it'll get better, but it really is. And I'm glad you said, I directed the question to Florida, but as you said, this is a global issue. It's happening everywhere. I know places I've traveled, places that historically are cooler. Like when I went to Alaska, I took, real thick clothing thinking it was going to be cold, and it was warm. And I was just like, wow, I just knew that being in Alaska, it was going to be freezing. Lorene, are you with us now? Or can you hear me? Can you say something so we can bring you into the conversation?
Lorene frozen again.
She's frozen. Yeah.
She's camera shy.
So Jeff, how is extreme heat? You're a pediatrician, you're a global pediatrician. How is extreme heat affecting children, seniors, and people with chronic health conditions?
Well, it has a critical impact, in particular on children, and in particular on pregnant women. So there's a huge evidence base showing the impact of increasing heat has negative impacts on pregnancies, on birth outcomes. So pregnant women are at increased risk. Children, by virtue of their metabolism, of their size, of their surface area, are also at extreme risk. And as always seems to be the case, those folks that are living in low-income communities don't have access to air conditioning, don't have access to the type of resources that others might have. They're at further increased risk. So it's from a medical standpoint, it's having a devastating and potentially a devastating impact. People don't realize when you look at the mortality figures for extreme heat. In Europe last year, 2 years ago, 60,000 people died from the extreme heat. More people die from heat than they do from hurricane winds and flooding. So that it's a killer. And unless we respond appropriately, it will continuously get get worse. And that's the direct effects. The indirect effects on crops and on migration and so on and so forth is also tremendously impactful. Then one of the good things here in Jacksonville is that we do have a resilience officer who's done a great job in beginning to try to create a resilient cities, but it's a political issue, and the politicians need to be behind these changes. And unfortunately, as we see what's happening around us here and around the country, as far as renewable energy sources and so on, that's not happening. I think, Lorene, are you there now with us?
Lorene, can you hear us?
Lorene, can you hear us? Or are you being shy?
Excuse me.
She's not being shy.
Yeah, no, Lorene's not a shy person. So, one thing that Lorene's been talking about, and I'll let her speak for herself, and talking about when you mentioned the people from low-income communities not being able to afford electricity, for example, or even have an air conditioner.
Right.
Something that we all take for granted, but with the rising cost of everything, people might not be able to afford to turn the air conditioner on, or they keep it up so high that it's really not cooling their home. Lorene, can you hear us now? Can you tune in?
I guess you're stuck with me, but I can talk for an hour. That's not a problem.
Of course you can. So let's talk about seniors, though, because every time there's an alert, a silver alert for a senior citizen who's missing, I just want to say to our audience, make sure that you keep up with your elderly folks, because it's just too hot for them to wander out in the street nowadays, obviously for obvious reasons, traffic, the way people drive, but also for these extreme temperatures. We really need to make sure that we keep an eye on our seniors, and also when they're in their home, for those seniors who are living alone, make sure you check in on them, because again, they may not be adjusting the thermostat like they need to. I have an elderly relative, and when she was living alone, we went in there one day and it was 100 degrees, and it was like, wow. And she was, frantic, like, well, I tried to adjust it, and it was a situation with the unit. We had to get it replaced. So make sure that you check on your seniors. Jeff, I want to get back to another point, because
can I just comment on that?
Sure.
There was a great study done a number of years ago, which I think is relevant today, and it was written up in a book called Heat Wave. And people may or may not remember 20, 30 years ago, there was a terrible heat wave, and this was focused on Chicago. And this was a sociologist who looked at the impact of the heat wave on low-income communities and high-income communities. And the obvious finding was that there were multiple deaths in the low-income communities, and a number of them were contiguous, and not so much in the high-income community. So this is not something anecdotal. This is something that we see in all communities. And then the question is, how are we going to respond using in Jacksonville, obviously our community? There are other things related to planting trees, canopies. I mean, all of these issues tracked by income and tracked by community and by zip code.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up about the tree canopies, because that's something that people may not think about. People are cutting back their trees because of hurricanes. Also, my neighbor, her tree, a limb fell in her yard. The wind was so strong. I know as trees age, that makes them vulnerable, but we also want to encourage
same with people.
We want to make sure that we tell people don't remove the tree in its entirety because it actually serves a good purpose. Lorene, you are moving a bit your arm. So are you with us now? Oh, every time I say something, it must be me, right? I guess it's me when I say something, she goes away. But Jeff, I have to get this in because far too often I see people, young, I won't say young, moms with their infants in a stroller, and they'll have a blanket completely covering the stroller. And I know they probably do that to try to maybe to keep the baby asleep and or to keep germs from their children, their babies from being exposed. But all I can think about, the environment where we are at that moment is very hot. It just seems like it's not a safe situation for those infants to be in. Am I being paranoid, or is there some truth to that?
No, there's much truth to that. So one of the differences in particular young babies is their ability to thermoregulate, their ability to regulate their temperatures. So again, they have a large surface area relative to their mass, and so they'll absorb a tremendous amount of heat compared to an adult, and do not have the capacity to thermoregulate. And so, yes, it's really it's very dangerous for babies in particular to be out for prolonged periods of time in the heat.
Thank you. Lorene, are you with us now? Can you hear us? Can you say something so that we'll know you're there?
Apparently not. Well, the one thing, JT, that we were talking about infants and their inability to regulate heat. You see that with the older adults as well. And one of the things that you're beginning to see is since the 1990s, getting close to like about a 200% increase in terms of mortality related to heat from in the older adults because of our ability. I say our these days. I guess.
You mean your ability, not our ability.
Or maybe inabilities. The inability for us to be able to also help regulate our body temperature, especially in terms of sensing the need for hydration and not putting in enough fluids. And of course, level of hydration will also reflect your ability to dissipate these body heat. So the older pediatrics, the older pediatric patients, because they do behave like the younger pediatric patients when it comes down to your body being able to protect itself from heat and dehydration and so on and so on. We must, like as you were requesting our audience to do, help keep an eye on our neighbor, our mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers. And a lot of them won't tell you that they're in trouble with their light bills. Just ask, if it's your family member. Because you don't want to do what you said. You want to get over there in time enough like what you guys did. But just imagine if you had been a little later in terms of getting over to see that relative and, walk in and, you just got a fried morsel.
Dr. Kane, I want to ask you this question, and Jeff, feel free to chime in, but what health issues are you seeing that are becoming more common because of climate change or the environmental changes that we're experiencing nowadays? Because you often speak of your geriatric patients. So are you seeing any particular health issues becoming more common because of that?
No more than that you can see the direct heat related issue. But dehydration is a good significant and probably acute kidney injuries, because when they don't hydrate themselves, they can get injury to their kidneys. And then, subsequently, you may see things such as heart failure or, and obviously strokes because of the stress being placed on the body, requiring it to try to keep itself cool, and particularly in a place when you don't have, those people don't have an ability to cool themselves off externally, lacking in the air conditioning environment and so on.
And what advice do you give your patients?
Yeah.
Drink more water. Oh, let me guess. Drink half of their body weight in water.
About that, try to just stay on top of it, and for the family members, here's one of the things I'm seeing more of, because we also see a higher amount of dementia that's occurring. You're also seeing where those relatives forget to drink water, and even if you put the water out there, they forget to drink. So we got to start putting things in place where you can help monitor those seniors' intake of fluid. And for them to remember, drinking coffee ain't the same as drinking water, or drinking sodas is not the same as drinking water, because of the diuretics and stuff associated with coffee and tea and some of the other things. And also in that age group, what you got to remember is a lot of them are taking diuretics because they may have a history of heart failure, of some other related blood pressure related entity, and so they don't drive diuretics, and they may tend to dehydrate faster than obviously get dehydrated quicker than those who are not on diuretic if they're not doing adequate replacements. And the last thing I might see in terms of, because of heat related, it's not the last only thing, but one of the last things because of the heat related issues is you might see a lot more muscle cramping and electrolyte abnormalities as a result of the heat causing that dehydration and losing a lot of those electrolytes. And so you start seeing heart arrhythmias and stuff of that nature.
So just, and I hope that we can get Lorene situated, because this is really the next question I have. I probably should delay it, but I'm going to pose the question to you all, because we have listeners from all over who are hearing this discussion, because I've been looking over, because I'm reading my comments from folks. Why should community organizations be involved in climate discussions? And what are some things that you all think that they can be doing?
Well, before, just to comment quickly on the issues related to children. So both the direct and indirect effects of climate change related to air quality, air pollution, that is resulting in increased prevalence and incidence of asthma. There's another issue which people are around the world there's a voluminous literature on that, and that's eco-anxiety. The anxiety that children and young adults are experiencing related to climate change. So can't underestimate the impact that's having on children and youth, not only anxiety, but depression as well. And then there's the indirect effects, and we just experienced it here last week, 2 weeks ago, with the fires in and around Palatka. And so the indirect effects of the experience of increased forest fires and so on, and then the impact of floods and so on. Now, we haven't necessarily experienced it here, but think Katrina, think the fires in California, the displacement of people, of populations, is substantial, and children in particular are impacted by that displacement. So we tend to focus specifically on the heat as an example, but the indirect effects are really, more often occurs actually, are really what impacts us. And then of course, issues related to athletes and young people in athletic programs and schools and so on and so forth. So it hits us from all sides. And the question, the question about communities is really the critical one. and that is, there's all public health is local, and unfortunately, that the issues related to climate change are grounded in politics, and our right-wing conservative state, as an example, and the things that are happening on the national level are not preparing us and allowing us to be prepared for what's happening. And so all the issues related to renewable energies and so on and so forth. Let me also comment and look at Rogers. We tend to think that the generators of climate change and carbon excesses are automobiles and so on and so forth. But in fact, the medical industry contributes more than 10% to the carbon excesses. And so even greening our practices, and we have a person here, Todd Sack. Some of you may know Todd. Todd was a gastroenterologist, right? But Todd developed a website called My Green Doctor. He's in over 100 countries now. And it's all about how to green your practice. None of the hospitals in Jacksonville have moved to actually create green environments in the hospital. And there's national organizations to help hospitals green themselves. So public pressure on our hospitals to say, get green, public pressure on our doctors' offices to say, go green. And the irony, of course, is that by going through and greening your medical practice, you can actually decrease your costs. So this is pervasive. And it also gets into, and if Lorene were able to be with us, it gets into issues related to planetary health and something called One Health, which is, it's not just impacting us, it's impacting animals, and it's impacting the environment. So this is a multidimensional issue. And coming back to your question, it's communities that can make the difference. Communities can demand that they have a canopy. Communities can demand that they have access to cooling centers for people who don't have access to air conditionings. It's communities that can ensure that there's appropriate drinking fountains around their community so that when people are out, they have access to water. It's communities that can demand that the schools have protocols in place to ensure that their children are safe, not just athletes, but their children who are walking to school or whatever, that they're safe, they're outside, they have access to adequate drinking water. So, as always occurs, it gets back to the community level to really drive, in this case, public health responses. And as I mentioned, we have a wonderful resilience officer who's been working really very, very hard to make Jacksonville a resilient city. And just, like I said, I could talk forever, but it's really very interesting. There was a grant program called, I can't remember if it's the MacArthur Foundation. Anyway, it's one of the major foundations that had a grant program called 100 Resilient Cities. They funded 100 cities around the country, around the world, 25 or 26 in the United States, gave them funding for a resilience officer to build resilience plans for their communities. Jacksonville turned it down. And this would have been from 2014 2014, I think, to 2019 or something like
Wow.
that. They were funded for 5 years. Jacksonville turned the money away. My daughter and I and a college student from Jacksonville, Harjun Singh, and some people may know his mom, who works with the Dolores Bar Weaver Women's Center, runs that. We looked at all of those resilience plans for the U.S. And the good news is that Jacksonville's resilience plan included children. The bad news is that most of the other resilience plans did not really focus on children. So that's a concern because, again, kids are the most vulnerable, even more vulnerable in many ways than elderly adults and pregnant women.
Well, even if they're not any more vulnerable than older adults, the one thing I will say, and this is not to dismiss adults, with me being an older adult, they're the ones that are going to have to should be living a lot longer than their parents and grandparents. And so that means their exposure level and length of time that they're being exposed to these climate related issues is going to be a lot longer than mine. But yet we're the ones, these older folks are the ones making these decisions and having these kids be forced to live in a world where the climate change is so critical that they're just looking at trying to survive. And we're probably dead and gone by that time, but we be done left that kind of impact because of lack of taking on the responsibility to make a difference in climate change.
Yeah, no, it's really critical. There's a law firm in Oregon called Our Children's Trust. We've worked at an organization of global pediatricians that I work with. We've participated and collaborated with them. And their work around the world, but in particular in Hawaii and Montana, they represent children. They represent children suing, in this case, the state of Montana and Hawaii and other countries, suing these countries and states for violation of children's rights to a future. They've had really very positive experiences with that. And so, Rogers, as you mentioned, this is an existential issue for children. If we look at the trajectory of climate change, and the figure was, if there's a 2 centigrade increase in global temperature, that essentially makes the world non-viable. Well, we've blown past that. Right. Or at least blown past 1.5 centigrade increase. So it's not about preventing it now. It's really about mitigating it and decreasing the impact. We're beyond preventing it, and so it's a very sobering situation.
Yeah.
And there are so many parts of our lives that need to be looked at. I think about the development that happens, and where communities where I used to see beautiful trees, all of a sudden they're gone, and they're building. The developers are coming in and building homes. I'm not anti-development. However, I think the planning should include keeping trees and making places and spaces. Through the work that we all have rallied for throughout our years, we talk about less screen and more green for children. However, if the environment is not safe for them to go out in, we really have to really think about this. When, as physicians, when you're encouraging your patients to get out and take a walk, well, they're saying, I was planning my family reunion. They were like, I don't want to go outside in the summer. It's too hot. You know what I mean? And that's just something that we often tell people to do, and naturally. So I'm going to stop a moment because we do have okay, so he's not going to do our behind the scenes guy usually does a mid-show minute. I don't want to steal his thunder, so I'm going to keep on with the discussion. But Jeff, you brought up so much that we need to think about the various aspects of our lives. It's not just the heat. I never even thought about the environment as it relates to the air quality and asthma. I know so many people who are suffering from asthma. And then you also think about those people with COPD. So we really have to think about, and if someone came up with a plan to make hospitals or doctors' offices greener, are there, is there a document that can help families figure out how to make their own homes greener, and businesses? There are numerous nonprofits in town. What can our listeners think about that they can do around their own homes or what have you, do an environmental assessment, if you will, to determine what we as individuals and families can do to help the environment? Anybody?
Yeah. Well, there are multiple websites available that people can go to, and then the city's resilience officer as well. And but it's it's pretty straightforward. I mean, even the reality is there was life in Florida before there was air conditioning, and so there's much that we can learn from history as it relates to what we can do to the environment to make it less impactful, the climate change less impactful. One of which, as we just mentioned, is planting trees, establishing a canopy, and keeping blinds closed that are facing different times of day the sun. So there's lots of things that people can do, and there are websites that they can go on to really look at that. And again, I don't want to also, this is part of a larger environmental issue. And so if we we silo this issue from an environmental perspective that just focuses on climate change, then we miss all the other environmental issues that are complicating our lives and are also in many ways existential. Not the least of which is, and we don't want to get into this now, but plastics and microplastics and nanoplastics and so on. And the issue that you mentioned as far as indoor pollution and the effects of heat indoors and the impact on, in particular, children with asthma is substantial. And we're seeing rates of asthma just go sky high.
We'll make sure that we put some references on our website at the end of the podcast, so that folks, if you don't know where to go for references, I know we all are used to Googling and Chat GPT and other places, but we do it for everything else. So,
well, go on mygreendoctor.com.
Yeah,
mygreendoctor.com, and you'll find an immense amount of information about climate change. And it's not just about greening the doctor's office, but on the website are posters that doctors and others can post in their offices with information. And so you don't have to wait to go to your doctor's office to see it. You can just go online to mygreendoctor.com, and there's a tremendous amount of information there.
Thank you. Lorene, are you with us now? Are you waving? Still can't hear you? Yep, I can hear you. We can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. So, Lorene, I wanted to ask you a question. Yeah, that's okay. We can still hear you. Even if your mouth is moving 5 minutes ago, we still want to hear your thoughts about this discussion. But before we do, let's pause a moment for our mid-show minute. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Pause for the Truth's Mid-Show Minute. Today is June 2nd, 2026. Mid-Show Minute. Climate change, our health, and the path forward.
I missed it.
Welcome back to Pause for the Truth. Let's take a quick minute to look at the ground truth of what is happening to our planet right now, and more importantly, how communities are fighting back. The current status. Are we seeing improvement? If we look strictly at global temperatures, the data presents a massive challenge. The World Meteorological Organization recently warned that global temperatures over the next 5 years are nearly certain to stay at or near record levels. Driven by human-induced greenhouse gas emissions and a projected El Niño later this year, there is a 91% chance we will temporarily breach the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold above pre-industrial levels between now and 2030. So, has there been any noticeable improvement? While the thermostat is still rising, the improvement isn't found in the weather reports yet. It's found in the global trajectory. The rapid expansion of green technology has fundamentally broken the old assumption that economic growth requires more pollution. Renewable energy is now actively outcompeting fossil fuels on price in major markets worldwide, transitioning from a purely environmental goal into an urgent economic and security imperative. While national and federal policy landscapes face political headwinds and budget shifts, local governments, cities, and grassroots initiatives are stepping up to build immediate resilience. Because cities account for roughly 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, they have become the primary battlegrounds for real-world decarbonization. State-level energy affordability acts. States like Illinois are pioneering legislation that pairs emissions reductions with direct consumer relief. Programs like Storage for All provide financial incentives for lower-income households and local businesses to install battery storage systems alongside solar setups, protecting them from extreme weather power outages while slashing utility bills. On the global stage, international frameworks are finally moving out of silos. The Rio Trio initiative is bridging gaps between efforts to stop land degradation, protect biodiversity, and curb carbon emissions, recognizing that healthy ecosystems are our best natural defense against climate impacts. Agricultural breakthroughs. Programs focused on natural, chemical-free farming are scaling up globally. By replacing synthetic fertilizers with natural biostimulants and diversifying crops, large-scale agriculture is restoring soil health, capturing carbon, and safeguarding local food supplies from severe droughts. Climate change isn't a distant threat. It's actively impacting our health, our infrastructure, and our collective future. But as the global energy transition accelerates, the focus has shifted entirely to accountability, public health, and real-time community resilience. Visit the link in the description or watch more at https://youtube.com/watch. Feet EGOEMU6SK.
Wow, that was dramatic.
Yeah.
That was very dramatic. Thank you, Tyrone. We never know what to expect with Tyrone. It looks like we lost Lorene again. We're gonna have to have her back because she's doing so much in the community, advocating for affordable electricity for all, for one, encouraging folks to grow trees, for two, in terms of creating those tree canopies, and educating people about how to, maybe you need to call the city, call 630 City and see if you can get some assistance to get a tree planted in your property. I'm hoping that Lorene can get on so she can share some of the work she's been doing. She just got back from a climate conference, so we're really looking forward to. Lorene, are you with us now?
Let me just comment on Lorene. We are lucky, privileged to
think
have
so.
Lorene. I don't know. There's a more avid advocate for climate change, for planetary health, for One Health than Lorene. So if there's one person that walks the walk and talks the talk, it's Lorene. So we're really very, lucky to have her.
I totally agree. And she obviously just heard you, Jeff, because she
Oh,
smiled.
thank
So she Lorene, I know it may be a little delayed, so your smile may not match your words. So, but I still want you to just share with our audience your thoughts about the topic tonight. Just whatever you want to, any point that you wanted to mention tonight. I'm not going to ask you a question, other than just say, have at it. What's important to you?
What's important to me is that we have an opportunity to do something. And the idea that there's nothing we as individuals can do to change the trajectory for the life of our planet is not acceptable. And when I look at my grandchildren, I am compelled to do even more, because knowing that they're inhabiting a planet that me and previous generations have worked really hard to destroy makes me really sad, because as we make plans to move our people or the humanity to other planets, it doesn't make sense to me that this is the only planet that we know that can support life without any extra technology to support it. And we are the only life force that we currently know that's actively every single day by the decisions we make working to destroy our home. Does not make sense to me. So as you were talking about retreating our communities, when you look at the heat plan, you will notice that it's neighborhoods that do not have a tree canopy that are some of the hottest neighborhoods. And those are the same neighborhoods where we're seeing high rates of upper respiratory infections. We are seeing whenever a disaster hits, they are the hardest hit. And we do know that if you compare two neighborhoods, one that has trees and one that doesn't, the one that doesn't have trees is 40% hotter, just by that one single action. So there is something we can do to change the trajectory of the planet. We may not be able to save the species that we have already destroyed by our actions, but we may be able to ensure that my grandchildren and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren will have a better opportunity of surviving what's coming.
And that's so important. People don't think
So
about. Oh no, that's perfect.
sad
Yeah,
enough?
yeah, that's pretty sad and makes me not want to go to sleep tonight. But no, I think about Lorene. I'm reminded of when I went to a beach in Florida. I won't even call it the beach. And when my family and I got in the water, we started feeling something, and it was dead fish floating in the on the beach. And it's just like, it was just gross. It was when this particular city had a problem with that algae stuff. And then I know the cities will go in and push it back or push it aside to protect industry. But people have to realize this is real. It's not just a matter of the inconvenience of it's too hot, oh, I'll go and turn the air conditioner on. But again, it's the extreme storms. It's the places and spaces that we go. I remember going to a lake here in Northeast Florida, and I was sad to visit that lake, and the water level was so low, it's not even usable anymore. They had to add a pool at the lake in order to have some water to enjoy. So let that sink in. The decisions that we make, as you said, and I'm guilty, I'm switching, I promise, because we have done a show on plastics. So we're all guilty of using so much plastics. And Dr. Kane always says how much plastic we're ingesting. And so I think what I'd like for you all to talk about in the next few minutes, if you don't mind, is what are some tangible things that people can do? We talked about trees. Jeff, you talked about closing the shades, if you will, to make your house cooler on those times of day where the sun is so prominent. But what are some other things? And you talked about green doctors and green hospitals, but can you all share some things that people can do in the next few minutes to get this started? hosting conversations like this, for example?
I'll let Lorraine go. I've been talking too much.
Lorraine, did you get
Yeah,
that?
and I missed it all, so I don't know what you
So I was
said or
saying
did
for
not
you-
say. But for me, one thing is for if
Oh no.
Keep going, Lorraine.
Keep
you're
talking.
saying that. Keep talking.
oh, I was going to say, if you are so if you would like to plant a tree and don't know how, especially in the right of way, which is, the right of way, we always think about, the area between your sidewalk on the road where there's the grass that does not belong to you. You may think it does, but it actually belongs to all of us. So if you do not want to plant a tree in your yard, you can call the city and they will come and plant a tree in the public right of way. And we all have that. So that's one small action that you can take. The second one is, if you are growing grass, consider growing something that's actually beneficial to the planet, like flowers that our pollinators need. And if we don't have bees, if we don't have butterflies, moths, ladybugs, we will not have food. We will have to take a Q-tip to put pollen into the flowers of our plants so that we can have food. And if you want to go extreme, don't grow grass. You don't have cows, you don't have rabbits. Nobody's eating that grass. You're just wasting water. So think about the things that we think are necessary. And as you're making those decisions, really evaluate. Like right now, we're in a drought. If you have grass, you really have no business watering anything. Consider you're not nothing is really eating it. And then the chemicals that you're spraying are breaking the intersoil connections, which are the bacteria that we really need to thrive and for our planets and our food and our bugs to thrive. But we are actually adding more chemicals and killing them. One of the things I took away from my climate meeting was this. For those of us who love to buy flowers, grown flowers are contributing to the destruction of the earth. And they're causing, they are not like the major contributors. Our oil gas industries is actually one of the major contributors, including our utilities like the JEA plants in Jacksonville. They in our atmosphere, and some of that has to do with our own personal choices. The habits that we like, we like to drive a comfortable air-conditioned car. We like to live in an air-conditioned house. We like to have flowers on our tables. So if you like flowers, just consider growing flowers in your yards so you can actually cut them yourself. Consider composting the food that's coming out of your kitchen, not purchase compost pile in your backyard. Consider using, if you're like me and you wash your dishes by hand, consider using the water that you rinse your dishes with to water your plants so that the water is not coming out of your faucet. That's diverting drinking water for, watering our grasses. So there's simple things you can make. Don't turn your AC on. I know we talk about that like to 70 degrees or 65. Consider turning it on to 78 degrees, especially if you're not going to be at home. So consider growing food. Well, I was actually talking to somebody today, and I said this. If you currently love watermelon without seeds, you need to think about that. That's corporations are forcing us into these consumer habits where they are the ones who control who has the power to grow our food. When you buy a seedless anything, that means you have to grow that thing.
Yep.
Wow. And I didn't think about that, by the way. I always thought of seedless watermelons as convenient.
You're then going to be dependent on corporations, and then demand more of corporations and be willing to be on.
Uh-oh, she's frozen again. Wow, Lorraine was saying some great stuff. I tell you that just the things that she's talked about, and Lorraine has had numerous conversations with me because growing stuff has just not been my thing. But I'm trying to get on board, folks. I really am trying to get on board, and I'm getting rid of the plastic bottles. So, again, if you don't know what to do, Tyrone, if you could put that screen up again, what Jeff shared, My Green Doctor, is that it, Jeff? MyGreenDoctor.org.
.com.
Go to that, get ideas, and also if you are not sure how to get started in composting, check with the local extension office that's located at 1010 North McDuff here in Northeast Florida. And as Lorene and Jeff mentioned, I think Jeff mentioned, we also have a resilience officer. Call the city of Jacksonville. If you live in a home and or you have loved ones who are unhoused or people you know who are unhoused, make sure when the city announces when those cooling stations are open, post those on your social media page, text your friends. Don't assume that people have heard about it. We'll text each other with good sales and all kind of other stuff, talk about folks, the celebrities and stuff. But make sure that you put information like this out in the community or within your circle of influence, because this is a very critical issue. It's a conversation that we need to continue having. I'm so sad that Lorene was having technical issues, but we definitely want to continue this conversation and do your part, folks. We are at the end of our hour. As Dr. Kane always says, we can go on and on with this. And Jeff says he has so much to talk about. He can go on and on. But we appreciate having our guests on. And we do like to give each of our guests an opportunity to share their final thoughts. And Jeff, I'm going to go with you. And I hope Lorene will be able to share some more thoughts with us before we end tonight's show. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, ultimately, the issues of climate change are political issues. You talked about communities. Individuals need to become politically active. Communities need to become politically active. There's no reason why we don't have far more renewable energy sources in our community. We own JEA as an example. So the life of your kids and your grandkids really depend on the political decisions that are being made today.
Thank you. Lorene, would you like to make your share your final thoughts? Or is she frozen? Is she delayed? Lorene, will you share your final thoughts?
I would ask the audience possibly consider joining. Yes. Consider joining the Jacksonville Climate Coalition and see about the work that we are working on right now to make sure that the JEA natural gas plant does not get installed on the north side. And that's actually not only our Floridians working on it, but now we have national groups that are joining the movement because we don't need another natural gas plant. And then also look at the work that the Sierra Club is doing in our community. They're doing really good work, really doing a lot of advocacy. And if there are young people in your life,
Yeah, she's frozen.
Yeah, she's frozen. So two organizations that Lorene mentioned. Check out what the Sierra Club is doing, and also the Jacksonville Climate Coalition to learn more about local climate initiatives and they are highlighting community partnerships working on resilience and sustainability efforts in Northeast Florida. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts?
I'm gonna be brief, but I would like to thank both our guests for coming on because they got a wealth of knowledge. We didn't have enough time, and because of the interruptions of our technical difficulties, didn't get everything across that we really wanted to get across to our audience. However, take a couple of things in mind, and that is, as Jeff and I both were enumerating earlier, the I don't want to say the weakest among us for lack of not hurting anybody's feeling, but the ones who are most vulnerable in our society are the ones who's gonna see the increase in asthma, the COPD, the kidney disease, high blood pressure. they're going to see all the effects of that. And what I like for them to do, since Jeff mentioned that eco-anxiety, I hope that we take these, the young folks that we have that are listening and throughout our state and nation, that they would take that anxiety that they have for what the eco-anxiety that Jeff described, and that is being concerned about what the planet will be like in terms of survivability. Hope they take that energy and turn it into something to make start making these old fogies start responding to what is needed in this society, in this world.
Yeah, Jeff did his thing tonight. I never heard of eco-anxiety, Jeff. So thank you. Now I know what my issue is. I don't know if it's a child thing, but I already think that I have that. But thank you to our guests again with the wealth of knowledge. These folks are public health advocates throughout the world, looking for things that are happening in other parts of the world and trying to start those conversations. And I would like to challenge our audience, begin the discussions in whatever group you're part of, be it your own family, your church, your civic organization. Have the conversations. If you don't know who to talk to, again, check with the Jacksonville Climate Coalition. There are experts who could potentially speak at your events. Climate change is not just about rising temperatures or severe weather. It's about people, health, neighborhoods, and the future we leave for the next generation. Today's conversation reminds us that every action matters and every community has a role to play in creating a healthier, more resilient community. Thank you to Dr. Jeff Goldhagen and Dr. Lorene Husband for your expertise and your just awesome advocacy in this space as well as others. Thank you to our listeners for always tuning in to Pause for the Truth, and we'll see you next Tuesday. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also share this podcast with others. Good evening.
We appreciate you spending time with us on Pause for the Truth. Ms. Jocelyn Turner and Dr. Rogers Kane are grateful for your support. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, catch us live on Twitch, and most importantly, subscribe on YouTube. A big shout out to Tyrone Jackson at Call Tyrone IT Services for keeping us connected. Join us every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more enlightening discussions. Thanks, and see you next week.